Today is June 6th, 2011, and two lovely ladies are on camera with us, Julie Craig and Peggy Harrison. We are in the Shops on Grand as it's preparing to close. It's been in business for a long, long time, and we'll talk about that later. But first, Julie and Peggy, do I have your permission to record your voice and your faces today?
Yes, you do.
Thank you so much. Well, we are going to be talking to Peggy first. Peggy, you got started in the flower business here in Ames. Tell us about how you got started.
I got started in the flower business thanks to H. Newell, that I'm sure very many of you remember. And he hired me right after I got out of school. And I went out to Denver and went to design school, and when I finished that, he called me that night I got home and asked me to come to work for him on Monday morning. I got home on Saturday night. Well, of course, it was a big surprise to me, but after talking with my husband, we decided that would be for me. And I managed the store for H. Newell for 16 and a half years. And then I bought it from him. Mm-hmm. And I owned it for 35 years. And then, bless my heart, Brian Smith came along, who was outstanding. And he wanted to know if he could work for me. And I told him that I knew he was going to school in overseas. He was going to one of the Swedish countries or one of those. And he went over there and he spent a lot of time traveling around. And that was in, I don't even remember the date. I don't. I called him on one night before Christmas. I called his mother and I asked her when Brian was coming home, and she said tomorrow morning. And I said, he was coming home that night, excuse me, and he was at work in the morning when I called her. And I was just so overwhelmed that he could drop everything so fast and come to work. And we were going through Christmas. He didn't come until the 1st of December. And it was, I'm getting a little confused on exactly what time he came, but he came in the morning of that night before I called his mother. And we started right in, and he had all of the training that he needed. He had college, and he went to design school in Dixon, Illinois, and then from there to overseas, and went through all the flower markets and things like that.
So if I could just step in for
Yes,
one moment.
go right in.
How did it get the name Everts?
It was owned by a Charles Everts back in the 1920s.
Really?
1921. And I think that Chuck Everts started this store then. Mm-hmm. And it was mainly a funeral shop, but it worked into something much larger than that.
And when you started to work for H. Newell, can you give me an approximate year about that, Peggy?
1958.
58.
It was 1958. I had gone away to design school in Denver, and when I got back, he called me the same night I got back and asked me if I would come to work for him.
And that was the shop at that time was across the street from a bank. It was on Burnett.
It was on 5th Street.
On 5th Street. It was on 5th Street at that time.
When I first worked for H, it was on 5th Street, right next to what was the Union's, Western Union.
My goodness.
It was the Western Union store.
People probably don't even know what a Western Union is.
It was down there, right
Uh-huh.
next door to us.
Mhm.
And we were in the laundry building,
Mhm.
and very small place, but it worked. We made it work.
So in 1958, what was the flower business about? What kind of people did you serve? Peggy, I'm thinking that you saw people at the happiest moments of their lives and the saddest moments of their lives.
That's true. That is true. It has quite a history. It was, when I went with it, mainly a funeral shop.
Mhm.
And they did lots and lots of funeral work with the Adams.
Mhm.
And it was a wonderful business to step into.
Did you help it branch out from that then? I'm guessing
Mhm.
that you
Yes,
must
we
have been
did.
part of
We
the
did.
creative
Mhm.
instinct behind that.
And then when we moved from our location on Fifth Street, we moved down to 412 Burnett.
Mhm.
And we were there until I left the business, and Brian came in to operate the business.
Mhm.
He bought the corner building next door.
And
And
yes, he even
it just-
expanded even more.
He
Yes.
expanded it more.
Tell me a
And
little
he's done
bit
terrific.
about your business philosophy. What were things you obviously you want to make money, but
That's
how
right.
how did you choose to do that? What were ways that you knew that you could make money in the flower business?
Well, I had a husband that I communicated with very well, and he was a traveling man, and he thought that this would be just the right thing for me.
Mhm.
And since I had one child, which was Greg, Greg was small when I went in there. He was born in '50, so he was 8 years old when I went into the store, and it worked out wonderful. We had it all planned out, and it worked wonderful.
What kinds of things gave you inspiration for your shop? Because people will say they walked into Everett's and there was just an idea of every square inch.
Well, and I'm glad to hear that. Ideas were one thing that we promoted, and to give somebody some of the ideas that you have in your head is interesting. There were so many interesting things that happened. I had to staff that store, and thank goodness Julie came along, and she wanted a job. And I told her that she was an answer to prayer. She thought I was crazy, but it worked out. She was an answer to prayer.
Before we talk to Julie for just a second, let me know a little bit more about how you got support as a woman in business, because in 1958 there were not a lot of women who were running their own businesses in the city of Ames.
No, there wasn't, but I just didn't seem to have a problem with that. And I liked all the people that I worked with. I was just so fortunate to have quite a staff of people on record. that
Now,
worked
people
for
talk
me.
about networking, getting to know other people in a community, and that helps build your
mhm.
business. How did you network in the city of Ames?
I would say through the store a lot.
Mhm.
People knew that I owned Everett's, and they were wonderful,
Mhm.
just wonderful people all the time.
Well, this wonderful person, Julie Craig, came into your shop.
Yeah.
Julie, how did you happen to get acquainted with Peggy Harrison?
My mom and my grandmother and my
Mhm.
aunt were all customers of hers, so I was
That's
familiar with her
true.
store, and I had shop envy.
Mhm.
And she had one of the nicest shops in Ames. So going to her Christmas open houses was always special. And when I decided I was done with baby talk at home and I needed to be around adults, I said, I'm either going back to school or I'm going to work for Peggy Harrison.
Isn't that wonderful?
And I got the best deal.
How did that come about? Did you just walk in?
Yes, I
She just
did. I
walked
told my
in.
husband I was doing one or the other, and I walked up the alley when
You
you were
did.
cutting flowers, and I said, "Do you need some help?" And she said, "Oh my land, do I?"
That's right, that's right. And she was an outstanding employee.
I don't know.
Well,
With
so-
a lot of ideas.
Julie, what did you learn from Peggy?
Everything, how to treat customers, how to use the space economically and profitably, how to make bows. You don't know how important that is. People have
It
praised
is,
me
it is.
for decades about my bows. Peggy taught me. And design work. I mean, she didn't actually give me classes, but being around that environment, I just learned it by osmosis, kind of.
You did well.
Yes, I worked small.
I know, you did work small, but you needed small things.
What did you first do for Peggy? What was your first responsibility?
Cleaning up flowers and putting them in the cooler and working the front counter for customers and putting bows on plants before I moved to the back room.
Can you give me a rough idea then? I'm sorry, I might have missed the year that you started working for Peggy.
Well, count, it was 35 years ago, was it around 1977?
Okay, all right.
It was about
So-
1937 or
77.
And so you were helping out on lots of different levels, and obviously Peggy got you started on just the groundwork first.
Right.
But when did you learn merchandising from Peggy?
Well, displays are us. That's what the shop was about.
That's
I mean,
right.
if you don't put things out there in a pattern and a tantalizing way, you're not going to sell them. So it's
That's
all
right.
about display. And just it's every day, all the time display, because she got merchandise and fresh flowers in every day. So you had to move stuff around and make up new plans and move things around. She did economic use of space was one of the best things he taught me, because it was like, don't just use the table, use the floor, use the sides of the table, use the airspace above it. It was all encompassing.
And that keeps your eye moving up and down in a space, and the eye then explores the whole area.
I knew Julie was destined to be a shop owner. I did know that.
I did.
And she caught on so quickly, and she did things so well that I knew this gal should have her own business.
Isn't it hard, though, to let an accomplished staff member go?
When you want the best for people that you work with, that doesn't enter into it. It just doesn't.
Because were you ever competitors?
No.
Oh.
No, she started here at Shops on Grand.
Mhm. Best friend.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But in a sense, Everett's was still selling some gift items, and you were gradually into the gift business. Well, Julie, we better talk about how you got started on Shops
That's
on
right.
Grand. We'll come back to that in just a second. So you worked for Peggy part-time, and at some point you said, I want to go out on my own.
Actually, no.
No.
I never thought I would. The
No.
opportunity fell in my lap, but it was years after I'd stopped working for her for some reason or another, a house move or more kids, something. But I worked part time other places after that for a while, and then the idea of Shops on Grand became a reality, and I wanted to be a part of it. So
Now, it was Judy Holtz, I think,
Judy
that
Holtz bought the building.
Bought the building.
And she had the idea of having each room be a different rental space. So it was a way to start a business in a small way.
Now, it was early 1970s, Julie?
85.
85. Oh, yeah, not to 85. Okay.
And I heard that this woman was going to do this, and I wanted to be a part of it. And my husband said, well, get a second opinion. And I said, okay, I'll ask Peggy. So I brought her over, and she said, start small and grow slowly. So I rented the smallest room, 250 square feet, and ended up with 5,000 square feet. So I obey her in all things.
Her first room matched her.
It was little. It was called Little Wishes.
Tell me what you sold. when you first got started?
Teddy bears, party favors, miniatures, rubber stamps.
Small inventory. Didn't take up a lot of space.
Well, economic use of space, you can pack a lot of those miniatures into a square foot.
Julie, what
Turn a
was
lot of dollars.
So in 1985,
Uh-huh.
you got on board with the Shops on
I
Grand
did.
idea. Take me through the evolution of where you went next in comparison to where Shops on Grand was going as well.
How I
Yeah.
grew,
Mhm.
evolved.
Go. Mhm.
Well, I can't give you names and dates because it's
okay.
kind of a blur, but the progression was Judy rented each room up to a different person. It was named a different name and had a different checkout. It was mass confusion. It was very
Mhm.
chaotic. I knew that if it was one name and one owner and moved in one direction, it would make it. It was a long time before that happened because all these different businesswomen had to become dissatisfied, which within the first 5 years most of them did, and they were gone. I just kept not buying their businesses but usurping more space until there were just a couple of us left, and Judy and Dick Holtz wanted to sell the building, and a couple from Des Moines bought it, Kim and Carleton Peterson, and they owned it for a while. I merchandised her things, and I bought the building in '96 and have had all the space and the restaurant since then.
What's been the most fun about this big space? Small person, start small, but fun about this big space.
It worked. It was such hard work and such sacrifice, but it worked. And I knew if I worked hard, it would, and it did. It was wonderful. And people were so receptive to it, and the people I met were great, and their response was great, and I don't know, it was just wonderful.
Tell me about some people who are regular customers, not by name, but what kind of people were your regular customers?
My favorite. 2 sisters who married brothers. They live in Slater, and they'll know who I'm talking about. They have come every Friday for lunch for probably 20 years.
Isn't that so?
And when one of them turned 88 a couple weeks ago, I greeted her with a yellow rose and free lunch and took her to my new house because they had been asking to see it. And then she sent me the sweetest letter. And they are so regular at between 11:15 and 11:30 every Friday that they will call us if they can't make it because they're sure that we're going to think they had an accident. So those are
Isn't
my
that
favorites.
awesome?
Yeah, there's some other stories like that, but they're our favorite.
What about milestones? Do people observe milestones in the restaurant here at Ivy's?
Since I've decided to retire, I've heard about my granddaughter's first tea party. My daughter came here when she lost her first tooth. My mom had her last tea party here before she died. It is, it's heartwarming, and I think it's been an unusual business.
I had asked Peggy the question about support for women owners and what kind of networking, and there really wasn't much in 1958. Did you find in 1985 that there was more support maybe for women or more opportunities to feel like you had people to talk to about being a woman in business?
I'm going to surprise you and say no. That's probably not the right answer.
That all answers are right, but tell me more.
I kept my own counsel, and I worked so hard I never went anywhere else. That's why nobody recognizes me outside of this building. I just knew hard work was it. I didn't have time for this networking business. Business after hours wasn't me. Probably wrong answer, but
There are many ways to run a business. Absolutely.
mine was
right.
to stay here, nose to the grindstone, and get her done.
Well, you had some concepts though, and the concept work. How did you land on that? Where did that come from? That your retail concept, obviously, it just blossomed. It was profitable. You don't have to tell me how much, but to make a good living.
Not for a long time.
Not
You
for a
have to
long time.
sacrifice a lot. I always paid people more than myself, and for a long time didn't pay myself at all because I was growing, constantly growing. For the first 15 years, it all went back into inventory. My bank account was my inventory and my real estate. It wasn't in my purse. And I wasn't going anywhere, so I couldn't spend any money,
Sure,
right?
that's right, that's
right. So my success was because I was so hungry to have it succeed.
Mhm.
There wasn't any way I was going to let it get me down.
Mhm. And the trajectory of your shop, the growth and the prosperity mirrored kind of what was happening in America too at that same time.
It was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's right.
The early 80s, we had a little slump there, but
Mhm.
I mean, my husband felt it more in real estate than I did in retail, because I was still struggling and growing.
Mhm.
But after that, whoop-de-doo.
Mhm.
It was prosperous.
I'm going to come back to both of you for just a second. And Peggy, can you talk about some customers that you liked and enjoyed and that were memorable in some way? I've kind of caught you off guard here, but
Yeah. I loved all the customers.
of course.
I really did.
What about your menagerie that came in the back door for coffee, like Joe
Oh, I had so many people that
and Robert?
would come in for coffee and just for little things. They'd come in for inspiration.
They'd come in for advice, Peggy. I
Advice.
know that.
Can you share who these people were?
Oh, golly. One was Joe Picken from First National Bank. And then, what was the other man's name that came? Donald? He's gone now. And Robert was there every day. Robert lived at the hotel. And he was there every day.
And what did you let him do? You let him deliver flowers on Main Street?
I did. I
You were
left him.
a joy to him.
I would give him a job to do.
Mhm.
And he would do it just so willingly. And it was just a wonderful place to be.
Mhm.
It really was.
Can you think, Peggy, I mean, just toss out a wild number. How many prom corsages do you think Everett's did during?
Oh my land!
A trillion.
Oh, there was a ton of those. That was back in the corsage days.
Mhm.
The corsages are not like that today, but we just knew that, and we kept a book of dates that when things were happening, and we knew that that day would be very, very large, and it was.
I'm sure that some of those prom days are almost as big as Valentine's Day, because
Oh golly, they were big. But that kind of business has really dwindled today. There are corsages that Brian does now for a high school, for a college, and they're just magnificent. He is one of the best designers around. He really is.
So, any other stories about Main Street or stories about customers that you'd like to tell me before I move on to the next sort of thing? Anything goofy or funny happened? I know sometimes it's hard to talk about it, particularly if you feel like it was difficult to surmount. Julie, you're grinning. I see you're holding back a grin.
Well, you used to talk about my family when Grandma Cook would call and want to send something to Fargo.
Fargo, North Dakota. Yes.
It's like the generational
They were
thing. You've
wonderful.
taken care
Yeah.
of generations of
Yeah,
people.
that's right.
Yes.
And they were wonderful, and I happen to love Julie's parents. They were themselves, they were wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you think Ames was a good business climate when you were when you were running your shops?
Mhm. Mhm. I thought Ames was a very good business climate.
Mhm.
I was always glad that I had gone into business.
Mhm.
I was always happy about that. And
Business has changed a little bit now. It's a little bit softer in Ames for retail.
It is. I think a lot of it has to do with the age in which we live.
Mhm.
And the opportunities to grow that Ames has lost.
Mhm.
It's a
We
little bit
have
different.
become less of a destination because
Mhm.
we've really lost some opportunities.
That's
Mhm.
right. We have. We have.
So, Julie, let's talk a little bit about your inventory and your products and what did you like to sell in your store?
Everything. I mean, I tried a little bit of everything. I had I had novelty things, I had children's things, I had clothes, I had shoes, I had furniture, I had antiques, I had cards, I had cosmetics, I had personal care items. Holy cow. I really like the personal care part. It would be fun
And
to
that
just
was
have a
fun.
bath shop, but I had a bath shop within the shops. Crabtree and Evelyn is one of my favorite products and one of my staples.
And you got your ideas at market then? Is that where you or did you?
I went to market 2 or 3 times a year for about a decade, and then I got so busy I couldn't even go. So for the last decade, actually, reps would come to me.
Mhm.
The more you go to one market like Minneapolis, the more they get to know you, and they know that you have a rapport with them. So they came to me. Market did give you some design ideas, though. The showrooms are beautiful.
Yeah, the showrooms are beautiful.
And Peggy, you went to market as well for Everett's? Mhm. Did
Yes.
you ever go to the same market?
I went, the first time I ever went to market was with her.
Mm-hmm. And Minneapolis or Kansas City?
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, yeah. The Minneapolis market is good.
Mhm.
It was easy to
I
negotiate,
think
I
it's
think.
very, very good.
And so you, by going to market, felt like you were on top of the trends for Ames. Like the Ames wasn't lagging. You'd see colors or you'd see shapes or you'd see that sort of thing.
I had gone to market in Chicago, Dallas, but I really liked
I
Minneapolis.
said the same
They
thing.
were
Chicago
a
and Dallas
special
were
group of
overwhelming.
people.
I didn't want to be
That's true.
exposed to that much. It was overwhelming. Minneapolis was just the right size.
Right, and it was just right. And we got wonderful things there. And Brian still uses Minneapolis. He has a lot of customers coming to him now from these places. Or if he calls anybody, they say, I'll be right there. And they usually are. They usually are.
Well, I know, Peggy, you still work at Everett's, which
I
is
do.
amazing. I won't even quote your age, but I hope
Oh, no.
I have all that energy. Julie, what are you headed for next?
Maybe babysitting for my 2.5-year-old granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
Going down to our farm in southern Iowa where we like to relax.
It's a beautiful place.
I don't know. I'm kind of overwhelmed by already the absence of my shop because I've really lived here for 27 years.
Well, are there any other stories that you would like to make sure we know about, just in terms of the Ames Historical Society capturing these ideas of entrepreneurs, seizing an idea and carrying it on? Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close?
Well, the one thing I would like to say is I have thoroughly enjoyed watching Ames progress and grow. And we're so fortunate here, so fortunate. And we're in a college town where people do have the money to purchase things. It's wonderful living here. It is, and it was wonderful being in business in this community.
I think the internet has probably altered
Yeah,
all of retail.
Yes,
Have you
it has.
observed
I
that?
think that is true.
Yes. I really think that I'm making my exit at a good time because customers have changed so much that, and we've been in business so long, that our customers are aging and dying. And like I told Teresa before, it's not really a renewable resource because the generations coming up don't shop the way their mothers and
They don't.
grandmothers did.
They don't.
I don't understand it because I'm too old, I guess. I gotta go look at something or try it on. I don't know. But it really has altered things, and I just want to say that there's a point in owning your own business when you have prospered that it just beats all.
Mhm.
It's so satisfying
Mhm.
to create your own wealth and be able to create wealth for other people
That's right.
by hiring people and
Mhm.
bringing them up. It's very satisfying.
Mhm.
That's a lovely way to close. I
Mhm.
think between the two of you, the arc of your influence in retail, you were kind of in the golden age of design shops.
That's right. That's right.
Good. Well, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank
stories with
you.
us.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much. We appreciate it.